Welcome to Chapter 14, Probability. You'll see that probability is simply favorable outcomes divided by the total number of equally likely outcomes. You learn that an impossible event has probability 0, a sure event has probability 1, and every event sits somewhere in between. Then you'll master a beautiful shortcut, the complement rule, where the chance of not E is just 1 minus the chance of E. We'll count outcomes carefully for coins, dice and a deck of cards, working through every example and exercise one gentle step at a time, before finishing with exam practice.
In the darkness of the unknown, a stuck student finds their way, the greatest minds, and turn confusion into brilliance.
Let's start at the very beginning. What does probability even measure? Roll a fair die. The 6 faces you see are the 6 possible outcomes, the complete list of everything that could happen. Now here's the word that does all the work, fair. Because the die is fair, no face is heavier or favored, so there's no reason for anyone to turn up more than another. That's what we mean by equally likely. Each of the 6 has exactly the same chance. Hold on to that phrase, because in a moment you'll see the whole formula rests on it. Now we pick out what we're hoping for, and we give it a name, the event. Say the event is rolling an even number. Which faces make that come true? 2, 4 and 6, watch them light up green. 3 of the 6 faces count as a success, and we call those the favorable outcomes, favorable simply meaning the ones we're rooting for. Notice we're not guessing yet, we're just carefully separating the whole list into the faces that count and the faces that don't. Here's the whole idea in one line. Probability is just the share of the outcomes that go our way, favorable over total. 3 favorable faces out of 6, which is 3 over 6, or 1/2. But why is it fair to divide like this? Precisely because the 6 outcomes are equally likely, each carries the same slice of chance, so counting how many are favorable and dividing by how many there are in all gives the exact proportion. If the faces were weighted unevenly, this simple fraction would be wrong. That's the one condition to never forget. And look at the size of the answer. 3 out of 6 can't be more than 6 out of 6, and can't be less than 0 out of 6. So every probability is trapped between 0 and 1, never negative, never above 1. Now let's raise the stakes, roll 2 dice. Here's where students trip up. It's tempting to just guess how many outcomes there are, and that guessing is exactly what goes wrong. So we do the reliable thing instead. We list every single possibility. Each row is what the first die shows, 1 through 6. Each column is what the second die shows. Every square in this grid is one pairing, first die this, second die that. Count the squares. 6 rows times 6 columns is 36. And because both dice are fair, all 36 pairs are equally likely, which is exactly what lets us count them straight. Now suppose the event is a sum of 7. Rather than trying to hold it all in your head, let the picture do the work. Sweep across the grid and shade every pair whose 2 numbers add to 7. 1 and 6, 2 and 5, 3 and 4, and their mirrors, watch them light up. See how they fall along a clean diagonal? That's no accident. As the first die climbs by 1, the second must drop by 1 to keep the sum at 7, and that trade-off traces a straight line of exactly 6 cells. The grid didn't just help us count, it showed us the shape of the answer. And now the count is foolproof, no doubt, no double counting. 6 shaded cells out of 36, which tidies to 1 and 6. This is the real lesson of the grid. The full list of outcomes is called the sample space, and once you can see the whole sample space in front of you, a count that felt tricky becomes a single glance. Whenever a probability problem starts to feel slippery, this is your anchor. Lay out the sample space and count on the picture, not in your head. Let's keep the very same event, a sum of 7, those 6 green cells, but now ask a different kind of question, one that unlocks a powerful shortcut. Here are our 6 favorable cells sitting inside the full 36. Keep your eye on everything that is left blank, because those leftover cells are about to become the star of the show. Every cell that is in green belongs to the opposite event, not a 7. Watch them flip to red. Now look at what we've got. Green plus red covers the board completely. The two regions tile the entire sample space with no gaps and no overlaps, and that's the whole reason the shortcut works. Every possible outcome must be one or the other. An outcome either sums to 7 or it doesn't. There is no third option, and nothing can be in both at once. That clean split is what we build on next. Let's turn that picture into a rule. Since every outcome lands in exactly one of the two regions, the favorable counts of the event and its opposite must add up to all 36, the whole board. Divide everything by that same total and the counts become probabilities. So the probability of the event plus the probability of not the event always adds to exactly 1. It has to. Together they account for every outcome, and a sure thing has probability 1. Now just rearrange that one equation, subtract the event's probability from both sides, and out drops the complement rule. The chance of not the event is simply 1 minus the chance of the event. This isn't a new formula to memorize, it's the same picture read backwards. And here's why it's worth gold in exams. Very often the opposite event is far easier to count than the event itself. Counting, not 7, directly would mean tallying 30 cells, but if you know the 7 is 6 out of 36, 1 minus that hands you the answer instantly. So there's the whole chapter in 3 breaths. 1. Probability is favorable over total, but only when the outcomes are equally likely, so always check that first. 2. When counting feels risky, list the sample space, and the winning outcomes count themselves right there on the picture. And 3. The complement, 1 minus the event, is always waiting whenever the opposite is the easier road, especially for not and at least 1 questions. Keep those 3 moves in your pocket, and every problem ahead is just these ideas dressed in a different story. Now let's work every example and exercise together. Let's walk through all 13 insert examples together, one gentle step at a time. Watch for the same 3 moves returning again and again. Count the equally likely total, count the favorable ones, and reach for the complement whenever the opposite is easier. Once you spot the pattern, these stop feeling like 13 separate problems and start feeling like one idea in 13 costumes. 1 con, 2 outcomes, the simplest chance there is, and the perfect place to see the formula do its work with nothing to hide behind. Let's set our compass before we walk. Probability is always favorable outcomes over total outcomes, the share of ways things go right out of all the ways things can go. So our very first job, every single time, is to count how many outcomes there are in all. A coin can land only 2 ways, head or tail, and because it's fair, neither is favored over the other, so they're equally likely. That word matters. It's exactly what lets us divide by the count. So the total number of outcomes is 2. Now, which of those outcomes are we hoping for? Ahead. Only one of the two faces is ahead, so exactly one outcome is favorable to our event. Put favorable over total, one favorable head over two possible outcomes. So the probability of a head is 1/2, a 50-50 chance, exactly matching our gut feeling about a fair coin. A tail is the only other outcome, so the very same reasoning applies, one favorable out of two. Its probability is 1/2 as well. And notice the two halves add up to 1, which makes sense, a toss must give a head or a tail. Insight: when outcomes are equally likely, probability is just fair counting, nothing more, no magic. Master this cleanest case and every harder one is only a bigger count of the same shape. Three identical balls, drawn blindly, and the word blindly is what guarantees each has a fair shot. Notice why the problem stresses she isn't looking, and that the balls are the same size. That's the setup working hard for us, with no way to see or feel a difference. She can't favor any ball, so all three are equally likely. Only then are we allowed to count. So first, the total is 3. Part 1 asks for yellow. How many balls are yellow? Just one. So exactly one outcome is favorable to our event. Favorable over total, one yellow out of the 3 balls. So the probability of drawing yellow is 1/3. Part 2 asks for red, and here's the beauty of symmetry. Red is in exactly the same position as yellow, one ball among 3. So without any new work, the probability is again 1/3. And blue is the last of the 3, once more a single favorable ball out of 3, giving 1/3 yet again. All 3 answers came out the same for a reason worth naming. Insight: when equally likely items are identical in every way that matters, they must share the probability evenly. Here each ball naturally takes 1/3, and the 3/3 fill up to one hole. Six faces. The whole difficulty is reading the condition carefully and listing exactly which faces count. A single die shows one of 6 numbers, and being fair they're all equally likely, so the total is 6. And I'll write them out so we can point at the ones we want rather than juggle them in our heads. Part 1 wants greater than 4. Here's where students slip. Greater than 4 does not include 4 itself, it means strictly bigger. So only 5 and 6 qualify to favorable faces. Favorable over total gives 2 out of 6. We always tidy fractions to lowest terms. 2 and 6 share a factor of 2, so divide both by 2, and 2/6 becomes 1/3. Part 2 wants less than or equal to 4. That little or equal to matters. Now 4 itself is invited, alongside 1, 2 and 3. That's 4 favorable faces. 4 out of 6, and dividing top and bottom by 2 gives 2/3. Insight: notice 1/3 plus 2/3 makes exactly 1, and that's no coincidence. Greater than 4 and 4 or less are opposite events that together cover every face, so their probabilities must fill up to 1. That's the complement rule quietly appearing. A full deck of 52, and our first real taste of the complement shortcut. Solve part to the long way, then watch it fall out in one line. Why does well shuffled appear in the problem? Because shuffling scrambles any order, so no card is more likely to be on top than another, all 52 are equally likely. That's a green light to count, and the total is 52. Part 1. An ace. Picture the deck structure, 4 suits, and each suit has exactly 1 ace. So there are 4 aces in all, 4 favorable cards. Favorable over total, 4 aces out of 52 cards. Both numbers divide by 4, so simplify, 4/52 becomes 1 over 13. That fits, 1 ace for every 13 cards, which is exactly 1 suit's worth. Part 2. Not an ace. Let's first do it honestly, by counting. Every card except the 4 aces qualifies, so that's 52 take away 4. 48 favorable out of 52, and dividing both by 4 gives 12 over 13. Now here's the beautiful shortcut. Not an ace is the exact opposite of ace. Every card is one or the other, so instead of recounting 48 cards, just take 1 minus the ace's chance. 1 minus 1/13 is 12/13, the same answer with almost no work. Inside, the complement rule, 1 minus P of E, spares you from recounting all the leftover cases. Whenever the word not shows up and the event itself is easy to count, count the event and subtract from 1. Only one player can win the match, so their 2 chances must fill the whole of one between them. This one has no counting at all, it's pure complement reasoning, so let's see the logic clearly. A tennis match has a winner and no draw, so exactly one of them wins. Sangeeta winning and Reshma winning are opposite events that cover every possibility, so their probabilities must add up to one whole. The problem hands us one piece. Sangeeta's chance of winning is 0.62. Since the 2 must total 1, Reshma's chance is whatever is left over, that is, 1 minus Sangeeta's. This is a complement rule with words instead of a deck of cards. Do the subtraction. 1 take away 0.62 leaves 0.38. Inside, when exactly one of 2 things must happen and nothing else can, their probabilities always add to 1, so knowing one instantly hands you the other by subtraction. "365 days in play, and once you count the easy event, the complement makes part 2 almost free." Here's a clever framing that tames the problem. Pin down Savita's birthday, whatever it is, as fixed. Then the only thing left to chance is where Hamida's birthday falls, and it can land on any of the 365 days, each equally likely. So our total is 365. Part 1 wants their birthdays to be different. For that, Hamida just has to miss Savita's one particular day. Out of 365 days, all but that single one work, so 365 minus 1 leaves 364 favorable days. Favorable over total, 364 good days out of 365. So a different birthday is almost certain, 364 over 365, or whisker below 1. Part 2 wants the same birthday. Rather than counting matching days directly, notice same is the exact opposite of different, so it's just 1 minus what we found. 1 is 365 over 365, so subtracting 364 over 365 leaves a single day, 1 over 365. Tiny, as you'd expect for a coincidence. Inside, different, has 364 easy favorable days, while same feels awkward to count head-on. So count the easy side first and let the complement, 1 minus it, deliver the hard side for free. One name drawn from 40, and notice how much care the teacher takes to make the cards identical and stir them, all to guarantee a fair draw. Every detail in the story is there to justify equal likelihood, identical cards so none feels different, and thorough stirring so none sits handy on top. That's what makes all 40 names equally likely. The total is 40. Part 1 wants a girl's name. There are 25 girls, so 25 of the cards would make our event come true. 25 favorable. Favorable over total, 25 out of 40. Both share a factor of 5, so divide top and bottom by 5. 25 over 40 tidies to 5 over 8. Part 2 wants a boy. There are 15 boys, so 15 favorable cards this time. 15 out of 40, and dividing both by 5 gives 3 over 8. Insight, 5 eighths plus 3 eighths is exactly 1, and it must be, because every single card belongs to a girl or a boy, so girl and boy are complements that fill the hole. That sum to 1 check is a free way to catch a slip. Add up all the marbles first, get that total right and each color falls out easily. The phrase, at random, is the key. It promises every marble has the same chance, so we are allowed to count. But the total isn't handed to us. We must build it by adding the colors. 3 blue plus 2 white plus 4 red makes 9 marbles in all. Part 1 wants white. There are 2 white marbles, so 2 favorable out of the 9 total, 2 nines. Part 2 wants blue. 3 blue out of 9, and since 3 divides into 9, that neatly reduces to 1/3. Part 3 wants red. 4 red out of 9, 4 nines, which won't reduce, and that's fine. Now a habit worth building. Check your answers, add to 1. Every marble has some color, so white, blue and red together must be the whole. 2 nines plus 3 nines plus 4 nines is 9 nines, exactly 1. That confirms we counted correctly. Insight, whenever every outcome falls into one of several groups, the group probabilities must sum to 1, so adding them is a fast, free check that instantly exposes a miscount. Two coins, and a tempting but wrong shortcut. The safe move is to list every combination before you count a single thing. The reason we say the coins are different, a 1 rupee and a 2 rupee, is to remind us order matters. We can tell them apart. So we list outcomes as ordered pairs, first coin then second. Writing them all out prevents the classic error of thinking there are just 3 cases. There are genuinely 4 equally likely pairs. Count what we listed, 4 outcomes, all equally likely. That's our total. Now read, at least one head, precisely. It means one head or more, so any pair that has a head in it counts. Only the Altius pair fails. Every other pair is a keeper. That leaves 3 favorable pairs out of the 4. Favorable over total, 3 out of 4. So at least one head has probability 3/4. Let's confirm it the smart way, because this is the shape of every, at least one, problem. The opposite of, at least one head, is no head at all, just the tails pair, 1 out of 4. 1 minus that 1/4 is 3/4. Same answer. And on bigger problems this route is far shorter. Insight: at least 1 is the complement of none, and none is usually a single, easy case. So for any, at least 1 question, compute 1 minus the chance of none rather than hunting down every winning combination. An optional peek beyond counting. Here the outcomes form a smooth stretch of time, so probability becomes a length, not a tally. This is a geometric idea, and it's worth seeing why the formula must change shape. The stopping time can be any instant in the interval. There's no finite list of outcomes to count. But the spirit survives. Instead of favorable outcomes over total outcomes, we take favorable length over total length. Same fraction, measured rather than counted. The music may stop anywhere in the 2 minutes, and every instant is equally likely, so the whole stretch of possibility runs from 0 to 2, a total length of 2 minutes. Within the first half minute, picks out the stretch from 0 to 1/2. So the favorable length is 1/2 a minute. Put favorable length over total length, half divided by 2. Dividing by 2 is the same as multiplying by a half, so a half of a half is a quarter. The chance is 1 in 4. Insight: when outcomes flow continuously, we swap counting for measuring length here, but favorable over total is unchanged at heart. The formula bends to the situation, the idea stays constant. Optional again, and 1 dimension up. The crash could be anywhere in a region, so now probability is an area. The same continuous idea, stepped up from a line to a flat region. The crash is equally likely at any point of the rectangle, so probability is favorable area over total area, the lake's area over the whole region's area. Watch how counting quietly becomes measuring, just in 2 dimensions now. First the total. The whole region is a rectangle 4.5 by 9, and area is length times breadth, so multiply to get 40.5 square kilometers. Now the favorable part. The lake measures 2.5 by 3, so its area is 2.5 times 3, which is 7.5 square kilometers. Favorable area over total area, 7.5 over 40.5. Decimals are awkward, so multiply top and bottom by 10 to clear them. That doesn't change the value, giving 75 over 405, which reduces to 5 over 27. Insight: for a random point in a region, favorable area over total area plays the exact role that counting favorable outcomes did for points and dice. The deep idea is one. The tool just fits the setting. Same carton, to buyers, and the whole problem turns on reading exactly which shirts each one accepts. One shirt is drawn at random from 100, so every shirt is equally likely and the total is a clean 100. Working out of 100 is a gift here. The fraction will read straight off as a decimal. Part 1 is Jimmy, and his rule is simple. He only takes good shirts. There are 88 good ones, so 88 favorable. 88 out of 100 is not 0.88. Because the total is 100, the count is already the percentage. Part 2 is Sujata, and here's the trap the question sets. She rejects only the major defect shirts, the 4 bad ones. So everything else is acceptable to her. The 88 good plus the 8 minor defect, which she doesn't mind. That's 88 plus 8, 96 favorable. 96 out of 100 is not 0.96, a higher chance than Jimmy's, exactly because she's more forgiving. Insight: the deciding skill was reading the acceptance rules slowly. Rejects only major defects, quietly welcomes the minor defect shirts, and missing that word changes the count. In word problems, the English is half the maths. To dice, 36 ordered pairs, the master example that shows off every idea in the chapter at once. Coloring the dice blue and grey is a deliberate hint. It lets us tell them apart, so we treat their pairings as ordered. Each die shows 6 numbers, and every one of the 6 blue values can meet any of the 6 grey values. That's 6 times 6, 36 equally likely pairs. This is the sample space we sketched as a grid in the concept. Let's be explicit about why the total is 36 and not 21. Order matters here. Blue 1 with grey 4 is a different roll from blue 4 with grey 1, even though both sum to 5. Treating them as the same is the number one miscount in this chapter, so we always keep pairs ordered. Part 1 wants a sum of 8. Rather than guess, sweep the sample space and list every ordered pair that adds to 8, 2, 6, 3, 5, 4, 4, 5, 3, 6, 2. Count them, 5 favorable pairs out of the 36. So the probability of a sum of 8 is 5/36. Part 2 wants a sum of 13, and let's pause and think before counting. The biggest each die can show is 6, so the largest possible sum is 6 plus 6, which is 12. 13 is simply out of reach. No roll can ever make it. 0 favorable outcomes. An event that can never happen is called impossible, and with 0 favorable over 36, its probability is exactly 0. That's the lowest a probability can ever be. Part 3 wants a sum of 12 or less. But we just saw 12 is the ceiling, so every single roll satisfies this. All 36 outcomes are favorable. A thing that's guaranteed is a sure event, and 36 over 36 is exactly 1, the highest a probability can ever be. Insight: this single problem stages the whole range of probability, an ordinary chance in between, an impossible event pinned at 0, and a sure event pinned at 1. That's the living proof that every probability really does sit between 0 and 1. Now let's solve every question of exercise 14.1, breaking each into small, clear steps you can follow. Keep the 3 anchors from the concept in mind. Check the outcomes are equally likely, count favorable over total, and lean on the complement whenever the opposite is easier. You'll watch those same moves rescue problem after problem. The 5 bedrock facts every probability rests on. Learn the reasons, not just the blanks. These aren't random blanks to memorize. Each one is a rule with a reason, and if you understand the reason, you'll never forget the answer. Let's fill each and say why. Blank 1. An event and its opposite together cover every possible outcome. An outcome is either in the event or not, with nothing left over, so their probabilities must add to the whole, which is 1. Blank 2. If an event cannot happen, then none of the outcomes are favorable. 0 over the total is 0. We give such an event a name, an impossible event, probability 0. Blank 3. If an event is certain, then every outcome is favorable. The full total over the total is 1. That's a sure, or certain, event, probability 1. Blank 4. The elementary events are the individual outcomes, and together they are the whole experiment, so their probabilities must add up to 1. The same covers everything idea again. Blank 5 ties it together. Since favorable can't be fewer than 0 or more than the total, the fraction can't dip below 0 or rise above 1. So every probability lies between 0 and 1, inclusive. Insight: these 5 facts are the guardrails of the whole chapter. Every probability you ever compute must sit between 0 and 1, with impossible at 0 and sure at 1. If an answer breaks a rail, it's wrong. This question guards the whole chapter. Two outcomes does not automatically mean each has probability a half. Everything in this chapter rests on equally likely, so let's test it honestly. The question to ask each time is simple. Is there any reason one outcome should happen more than the other? If yes, they're not equally likely, and our favorable over total formula would give a wrong answer. Case 1. A car starting. A well-maintained car almost always starts, a broken one almost never does. Condition tilts the balance, so starting and not starting are not equally likely. Case 2. A basketball shot. A trained player scores far more often than a beginner. Skill breaks the symmetry, so scoring and missing are not equally likely. Case 3. A true or false guess made blindly. With no knowledge, there's genuinely no reason to lean either way, so right and wrong really are a fair 50-50, equally likely. Case 4. A baby sex. Setting aside tiny real-world biases, boy and girl are taken as balanced, so this too is treated as equally likely. Insight: equal likelihood needs true symmetry between outcomes. The moment skill, condition, or bias favors one side, it's gone. Always confirm this before writing a single fraction. This is the flip side of the last question. Fair is just another word for equally likely. Let's pin down what fair even means here. It means neither team is favored, so both must have exactly the same chance of winning the toss. That's the target we need to justify. A coin has just two outcomes, head and tail, and because it's unbiased, there's no reason for one to come up more than the other, so they're equally likely, each with probability 1/2. Assign one team to heads and the other to tails, and each team's chance of winning the toss is exactly that 1/2. Equal chances, so no team is favored, and that's precisely why it's fair. Insight: fairness and probability always traces back to the outcomes being genuinely equally likely. A coin is fair for a toss exactly because heads and tails each carry an honest 1/2. A pure test of the range rule: every probability must sit between 0 and 1. Recall why the range exists. Probability is favorable over total, and favorable can't be fewer than none or more than all, so the fraction is trapped between 0 and 1. So our whole job is to check each option against that band. Option A, 2/3, is about 0.67, comfortably between 0 and 1, so it's a legal probability. Option C, 15%, is 0.15, inside the range, and option D, 0.7, is inside as well. Both are fine. Option B is -1.5, a negative number. But a count of favorable outcomes can never be negative, so probability can never dip below 0. This one is impossible. Insight: anything negative or anything above 1 is disqualified on sight. You don't even need to know the experiment. The range 0 to 1 is a probabilities passport. The complement rule in its purest, one-line form. Recall where the complement rule comes from. An event and its opposite together cover every outcome, so their probabilities add to 1. Rearranged, not E, is simply 1 minus the chance of E, no counting needed. We are handed P of E as 0.05, so slot it in. 1 minus 0.05 is 0.95. Done. Insight: whenever you know an event's probability and want its opposite, the complement rule collapses the whole thing to a single subtraction from 1. A bag of only lemon candies, the perfect stage to meet the two extremes, the impossible and the sure event. Before reaching for any fraction, just picture the bag. Every candy inside is lemon. That single fact decides both answers, so let's think about what's possible rather than compute. Part 1 asks for orange. But there isn't a single orange candy in there, 0 favorable out of the total. An event with no favorable outcomes simply cannot happen, so its probability is 0. That's an impossible event. Part 2 asks for lemon. Now every candy qualifies, favorable equals the total, so drawing a lemon is guaranteed. Full total over total is 1. That's a sure event. Insight: these are the two ends of the scale. Nothing favorable gives probability 0, impossible. Everything favorable gives 1, sure. Every other probability lies somewhere between these two posts. Same birthday and not the same birthday are opposites, a giveaway for the complement rule. Spot the structure. Two students either share a birthday or they don't, there's no middle ground. So, same and not same are complements, and their probabilities must add to 1. We are given the not same chance as 0.992, so rearrange the same chance as 1 minus that. 1 minus 0.992 leaves 0.008, a very small chance, which fits, since matching birthdays is rare. Insight: when a problem hands you the probability of the not event, don't recompute from scratch. 1 minus it gives the event you want directly. Count every ball for the total, then let the complement handle not read in part 2. The total isn't stated outright, we build it. A random draw makes each ball equally likely, so add the reds and blacks. 3 plus 5 is 8 balls in all. Part 1 wants red. There are 3 red balls, so 3 favorable out of the 8, 3 eighths. Part 2 wants not red. That's the exact opposite of red, so rather than counting black balls, just subtract from 1. 1 is 8 eighths, so 8 eighths minus 3 eighths leaves 5 eighths. Insight: not red also equals the 5 black balls over 8 by direct count, and it lands on the very same 5 eighths. The complement always agrees with counting, because it's the same truth seen from the other side. Three colors, and a sneaky complement waiting in part 3. Build the total first, since it's not given. A random draw makes every marble equally likely, so add all three colors. 5 plus 8 plus 4 is 17 marbles. Part 1 wants red. 5 red marbles out of the 17, so 5 17s. Part 2 wants white. 8 white out of 17, so 8 17s. Part 3 wants not green. You could add red and white, but the shortcut is cleaner. Not green is the opposite of green, and there are just 4 green, so subtract that chance from 1. 1 is 17 17s, minus for 17s leaves 13 17s. Inside, not green, by direct count is red plus white, 5 plus 8, which is 13, matching the complement exactly. When the unwanted group is small, subtracting it from 1 is the quicker path. Add every coin for the total, then let the complement lighten the arithmetic in part 2. The problem promises each coin is equally likely to fall, so we may count, but first we need the total, and that means adding all 4 piles. 100 plus 50 plus 20 plus 10 is 180 coins. Part 1 wants a 50 paise coin. There are 100 of those, so 100 favorable out of 180. Both numbers share a factor of 20, so divide top and bottom by 20. 100 over 180 tidies to 5 over 9. Part 2 wants not a 5 rupee coin. Counting the other 170 directly is heavy, so use the complement. There are only 10 5 rupee coins, so subtract their chance from 1. 10 over 180 simplifies to 1 over 18, and 1 minus 1/18 is 17 18s. Inside, rather than adding 170 coins, the complement turns part 2 into 1 minus a tidy 1/18. Same answer, far less arithmetic. Count the small group and subtract. A clean, no frills favorable over total, count all the fish, then the males. A random draw makes each fish equally likely, so first find the total by adding both kinds. 5 male plus 8 female is 13 fish in the tank. Our event is a male fish, and there are 5 of them, so 5 favorable outcomes. Favorable over total, 5 out of 13. It won't reduce, and that's perfectly fine. Inside, strip away the aquarium story and it's the bare formula, favorable over total. The figure is just decoration. The real work is getting the total by adding both groups. Eight equal sectors. The skill is listing exactly which numbers fit each rule. The problem tells us the 8 numbers are equally likely, the sectors are equal, so no number is favored. That makes the total 8. And each part is just a matter of counting which numbers satisfy the condition. Part 1 wants an 8. Only one sector shows 8, so 1 favorable out of 8. Part 2 wants an odd number. List them so you don't miss any. 1, 3, 5, 7, 4 of them. So 4 over 8, which halves to 1/2. Part 3 wants greater than 2, strictly bigger, so 2 itself is out. That leaves 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 6 numbers. 6 over 8 reduces to 3/4. Part 4 wants less than 9. But every number here, 1 through 8, is already below 9, so all 8 qualify. Full total over total is 1. This is a sure event. Inside, Part 4 is a live example of a sure event when the condition is true for every outcome. Favorable equals total and the probability is exactly 1. Spotting that saves you counting. Six faces, and the whole care is in reading the word between correctly. A fair die has 6 equally likely faces, so the total is 6. Now each part is just about naming the right favorable set carefully. Part 1 wants primes, numbers with exactly 2 divisors. On a die those are 2, 3 and 5. Careful, 1 is not prime, and 4 and 6 aren't either. So 3 favorable, giving 3/6, a half. Part 2 says between 2 and 6, and here's the trap. Between means strictly inside, so the endpoints 2 and 6 are excluded. That leaves 3, 4 and 5, 3 numbers, again a half. Part 3 wants odd numbers, 1, 3 and 5, 3 of them, so 3/6, a half once more. Inside, the deciding move was reading between 2 and 6 as excluding 2 and 6 themselves, include them by mistake and the count changes. Precise reading of the words is exam critical. Know your deck cold, 4 suits, 26 red and 26 black, 12 face cards, and every part becomes easy. Card problems are all counting once you carry the deck's map in your head, so let's lay it out. 52 cards, split 26 red and 26 black, with 12 face cards, the jack, queen and king in each of the 4 suits. A well-shuffled deck makes all 52 equally likely, so the total is 52. Part 1, a red king. Kings come 1 per suit, and the red suits are hearts and diamonds, so 2 red kings. 2 over 52 reduces to 1 over 26. Part 2, any face card. 3 faces per suit times 4 suits is 12. 12 over 52 reduces to 3 over 13. Part 3, a red face card. 3 faces in hearts and 3 in diamonds make 6. 6 over 52 reduces to 3 over 26. Part 4, the jack of hearts, that names 1 exact card, so 1 favorable out of 52. Part 5, a spade. Each suit has 13 cards, so 13 spades. 13 over 52 is 1/4, which makes sense, 1 suit out of 4. Part 6, the queen of diamonds, again 1 specific card, so 1 over 52. Inside, none of these needed a clever trick, just the deck structure held firmly in mind. Memorize the map once, and card questions turn into simple counting every time. The key idea, removing a card changes the total for the next draw. Watch the sample space shrink. We begin with just 5 cards, face down and well shuffled, so all 5 are equally likely. That's our starting total. Part 1 wants the queen. Exactly 1 of the 5 is the queen, so 1 favorable out of 5. Now the crucial move, the queen is drawn and set aside, so it's gone from the pack. Only 4 cards remain, and this new total of 4 is what the next draw works from. Forgetting to update the total is the classic slip here. Part 2 wants an ace. The ace was never removed, so it's still sitting among the 4, 1 favorable out of the new total of 4. Part 2b wants a queen again, but the queen is the very card we set aside. None of the 4 remaining is a queen, so 0 favorable. Drawing a queen now is impossible, probability 0. Insight: when a card is taken away and not replaced, the sample space itself changes, the total drops to 4, and the missing queen turns its own event impossible. Always redraw the sample space after a removal. The classic total building trap: at both piles, don't just use the good pens. The can't tell by looking line is doing a job. It makes every pen equally likely to be drawn. Now the total is the whole lot, so at both groups, 132 good plus 12 defective is 144 pens. Our event is a good pen, and there are 132 of those, the favorable count. Favorable over total, 132 out of 144. Both share a factor of 12, so divide top and bottom by 12. 132 over 144 tidies to 11 over 12. Insight: the trap is using 132 as the total, but 132 is only the favorable count. Always add every group first, because the denominator must be the whole lot, defective pens included. Not replaced is the whole point. One draw changes both the total and the favorable count. We start with 20 bulbs, of which 4 are defective, which quietly means 16 are good. Let's hold both numbers, because the second part will move them. Part 1 wants a defective bulb, 4 defective out of 20, which reduces to 1/5. Now the twist: a good bulb is drawn and not put back. So the lot shrinks, the total drops from 20 to 19, and because it was a good bulb that left, the good count drops from 16 to 15. Both numbers change together. Part 2 wants a good bulb from what remains, 15 good out of the new total of 19. Insight: drawn and not replaced always forces to updates before the next draw. Knock one off the total, and knock one off whichever group the removed item belonged to. Miss either and the fraction is wrong. The whole game is counting the favorable numbers correctly. The dividing is trivial. 90 discs, numbered 1 to 90, drawn at random, so all 90 are equally likely. That's the total. From here every part is really a counting puzzle. Part 1 wants 2-digit numbers. Instead of listing them, count smartly. The single-digit numbers are 1 to 9, 9 of them, so the 2-digit ones are everything else. 90 minus 9, which is 81. That's 81 over 90, reducing to 9 tenths. Part 2 wants perfect squares up to 90. List them so none slips by. 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, 36, 49, 64, 81, the squares of 1 through 9. 10 squared is 100, too big, so we stop. 9 of them, giving 9 over 90, 1/10. Part 3 wants multiples of 5. They run 5, 10, 15, up to 90, and there are exactly 90 divided by 5, which is 18. So 18 over 90 reduces to 1/5. Insight: every part lived or died on nailing the favorable set exactly, counting the complement for 2-digit, listing squares carefully, dividing for multiples. Get the count right and the fraction writes itself. The subtle point: a repeated letter means one outcome can occur on more than one face. The die has 6 faces, so the total is 6. That part is normal. But look closely at the labels, their letters, and A appears twice while the others appear once. That repetition is the whole lesson here. Part 1 wants the letter A. Since A sits on 2 of the 6 faces, 2 faces make our event come true. 2 favorable, not 1. 2 over 6 reduces to 1/3. Part 2 wants D, which appears on just a single face, 1 favorable out of 6, so 1/6. In sight, always count faces, not distinct letters. A letter on 2 faces has double the chance. Probability tracks how many equally likely outcomes match, and each face is one such outcome. Optional, the geometric probability, a circle's area over a rectangle's area. The die lands at a random point, and any point in the rectangle is equally likely, so counting becomes measuring area. Probability is the favorable area, the circle, over the total area, the rectangle. Same, favorable over total, spirit, now with areas. First the total. The rectangle is 3 meters by 2 meters, and area is length times breadth, so 3 times 2 is 6 square meters. Now the favorable. The circle's diameter is 1 meter, so its radius is half of that, 1/2. Its area is pi times radius squared, pi times a half squared, which is pi over 4 square meters. Favorable area over total area, pi over 4 divided by 6. Dividing by 6 multiplies the denominator, giving pi over 24. In sight, for a random landing point, favorable area over total area is exactly the geometric twin of favorable outcomes over total outcomes. The idea is identical, only counting has become measuring. Translate the story first, by means good, not by means defective, then they're just complements. The total of 144 is given, but the good count isn't, so subtract. 144 pence minus the 20 defective leaves 124 good ones. That subtraction is the real first step. Part 1. Noori buys only if the pen is good. So, but means a good pen. 124 favorable out of 144. Both divide by 4, so 124 over 144 reduces to 31 over 36. Part 2. Will not buy is the exact opposite of buy, so instead of recounting defective pens, just subtract from 1, 36 36 minus 31 gives 5 over 36. In sight, not by direct count is the 20 defective over 144, which also reduces to 5/36. The complement agrees with the count, as it must. Translating by and not by into good and defective is what unlocks it. The heart of the chapter's warning. The 11 sums to 12 are not equally likely. Here's the deep point of the whole chapter. The equally likely outcomes are the 36 ordered pairs of the 2 dice, not the 11 sums. So each sum's probability is however many pairs produce it, divided by 36. Let's count those pairs, and it's easiest with the 6 by 6 grid in mind. The low sums have few pairs behind them. Sum 2 comes only from 1 and 1, so 1 way. Sum 3 from 2 orders, 2 ways. Sum 4 has 3. Sum 5 has 4. Sum 6 has 5. See the ladder climbing. Sum 7 sits at the very top with 6 ways, that long diagonal we shaded in the concept. the most likely sum of all. Past 7 the ladder descends in a mirror image. Sum 8 has 5 ways, 9 has 4, 10 has 3, 11 has 2, and 12 has just 1. The whole thing is a symmetric hill peaking at 7. Part 2. The student's error is now plain. The sums have wildly different numbers of pairs. 7 has 6 ways, 2 has only 1, so they cannot each be 1/11th. The 1/11th claim is simply wrong. Insight: this is the chapter's biggest trap laid bare. Favorable over total demands equally likely outcomes, and the sums aren't. Only the 36 ordered pairs are equally likely, so always count pairs, never sums. The student is not correct. The smart move: find the 2 winning outcomes first, then complement for the 6 losses. Each toss has 2 outcomes, and 3 tosses multiply. 2 times 2 times 2 is 8 equally likely results, from HHH all the way to TTT. That's our sample space. Now think about winning, because it's the smaller, tidier set. Hanit wins only when all 3 match, that's HHH or TTT, just 2 outcomes. Far easier to spot than the losses. Losing is simply everything that isn't a win, so 8 total minus 2 wins leaves 6 losing outcomes. This is the complement in action. Count the small side, subtract. Favorable losses over total, 6 out of 8, which reduces to 3/4. Insight: the 2 winning cases are obvious while the 6 losses are fiddly to list, so count the wins and take 8 minus 2. When one side of an event is smaller, always count that side first. Two throws, 36 outcomes, and the phrase, at least once, is a flag for the complement. The hint reminds us that throwing 1 die twice is the same as throwing 2 dice, so we get 6 times 6, 36 equally likely ordered pairs. That's the sample space. Part 1 wants number 5 on either throw. On each throw, 5 of the 6 faces are safe, anything but a 5, so by pairing safe with safe, 5 times 5 gives 25 favorable pairs. Favorable over total, 25 out of 36. Part 2 wants at least 1 5. Counting all those cases directly is messy, but notice the opposite of at least 1 5 is exactly number 5, which we just found. So subtract from 1. 36 minus 25 leaves 11 over 36. Insight: at least once is the complement of never, and never is a single clean product to count. So always turn at least 1 into 1 minus the chance of none. It dodges a pile of casework. A trap spotting question. Grouping outcomes together can secretly hide unequal likelihoods. Both arguments jump to equal probabilities, so the one thing to test is whether the outcomes they listed are genuinely equally likely. If they've lumped several true outcomes into one label, the shortcut breaks. Part 1. 2 coins. The real equally likely outcomes are the 4 ordered pairs, HH, HT, ET, TT, not 3. The argument's list of 2 heads, 2 tails, 1 of each quietly merges 2 different pairs into one. See the merge, 1 of each actually covers both HT and ET, so it's 2 of the 4 outcomes, probability 2/4, a half, not 1/3. Because the 3 listed cases aren't equally likely, the whole argument fails. Part 2. A die grouped into odd and even. Here check the counts. Odd is 1, 3, 5 and even is 2, 4, 6, 3 faces each. Equal counts, so these two groups really are equally likely. Since odd and even each hold 3 equally likely faces, the 1/2 conclusion is sound, so the second argument is correct. Insight: the difference is whether the grouped labels contain equal numbers of true outcomes, coins, one of each, hides to cases and breaks. But a die's odd and even hold 3 each and hold up. Always unpack a group before trusting equal chances. Let's lock it all in with exam-style questions before you go. In an exam, the marks come not just from the right answer but from knowing why the traps are traps. So for each one we'll say why the correct choice is right and, just as importantly, why the tempting wrong ones fail. The word not is the signal. Reach for the complement rule, where the chance of naughty is 1 minus the chance of e, because an event and its opposite must add to 1. Consider the 4 options. 1 minus 3/7 is for 7s, so not is 4 over 7. Watch the traps. 3/7 just repeats p of e, forgetting to subtract. 7/4 flips the fraction and is above 1, which no probability can ever be, and 1 would only hold if e were impossible. For 7s is the only sound answer. Don't trust your gut here. List all 4 equally likely ordered outcomes, then keep only those with exactly 1 head, no more and no fewer. Consider the 4 options. The 4 outcomes are HH, HT, ETH, TT. Exactly 1 head means 1 and only 1, so HT and ETH qualify but HH has 2 heads and TT has none. That's 2 out of 4, a half. The trap 1/4 counts just a single ordered case. 3/4 is really at least 1 head, not exactly 1. So 1/2 is correct. Lean on the deck structure. Face cards are the jacks, queens and kings, 3 per suit across 4 suits, so 12 in all. Consider the 4 options. 12 face cards over 52 reduces, dividing both by 4, to 3 over 13. The traps mirror common slips. 1/13 counts only 1 suit's face card, 4/13 mistakes it for aces or overcounts to 16. And 1/4 is 13 cards, a whole suit, not the face cards. 3/13 is right. Read, greater than 4, strictly. 4 itself is out, so only 5 and 6 count on a die. Consider the 4 options. The favorable faces are 5 and 6, so 2 out of 6, which reduces to 1/3. Watch the traps. 1/6 counts only a single face, 1/2 would mean 3 faces, as if 4 were wrongly included. 2/3 is the complement, 4 or less. 2 faces over 6, 1/3, is correct. Test each option against the range rule. A probability must sit from 0 to 1, so anything above 1 or below 0 is automatically disqualified. Consider the 4 options. Check them. 0.7 is fine, 2/3 is about 0.67 and fine, and 0 is fine. It just means an impossible event. But 7/6 is bigger than 1, and since favorable can never exceed total, no probability can pass 1. So 7/6 is the impossible value. That's the answer they want. Take assertion reason in 3 careful steps. Is the assertion true on its own? Is the reason true on its own? And does that reason actually explain why the assertion holds? Which option is correct? First, the assertion. Two coins give HH, HT, et, TT, and the only outcome with no tail at all is HH, probability 1/4. So, at least one tail is 1 minus that, 3/4. True. Now the reason. The complement rule P of E equals 1 minus P of not E is a genuine identity. True. And notice we used exactly that rule, computing at least one tail as 1 minus no tail. So the reason explains the assertion, and the answer is A. Both true. Reason explains. Same three checks. Judge the assertion alone, judge the reason alone, then ask whether the reason is the actual explanation of the assertion. Which option is correct? The assertion, a die shows only 1 through 6, so a 7 has no favorable face, 0/6, and can never come up. Its probability is 0. True. The reason, an impossible event has probability 0, is a core rule. True. And that rule is precisely why getting a 7 has probability 0. The 7 is the impossible event. So the reason explains the assertion, and the answer is A. Both true. Reason explains. A fairground spinner with 12 equal sectors. The word equal is what matters. Equal sectors mean every number is equally likely, which is exactly the condition our formula needs, so each part is just favorable outcomes over 12. List the multiples of 3 up to 12 rather than trusting memory. Write them out and count. The multiples of 3 up to 12 are 3, 6, 9 and 12, 4 of them. 4 favorable over 12 reduces, dividing both by 4, to 1/3. List the primes from 1 to 12 carefully. Remember 1 is not prime, and don't skip 2. The primes up to 12 are 2, 3, 5, 7 and 11, 5 of them. Note 1 is excluded, since a prime needs exactly 2 divisors, and 9 is left out as 3 times 3. 5 over 12, which won't reduce. Read greater than 10 strictly. 10 itself is out, so only 11 and 12 remain. Strictly greater than 10 leaves just 11 and 12 to numbers, since 10 itself doesn't count. 2 over 12 reduces, both dividing by 2, to 1/6. The word not is your cue. This is a job for the complement rule. The total isn't given, so build it. A random draw makes each marble equally likely, so add all 3 colors. 5 plus 8 plus 4 is 17. White is the group we're told about, 8 white marbles, so the chance of white is 8 over 17. Not white is the exact opposite of white, so rather than count red and green separately, subtract the white chance from 1. 17 17ths minus its 17ths leaves 9 17ths. Inside, not white by direct count is 5 red plus 4 green, which is 9, matching the complement exactly. When you're given the unwanted group's chance, 1 minus it is the fastest route. The chapter's key caution in action. The equally likely things are the 36 pairs, not the sums. Two dice give 6 times 6, 36 equally likely ordered pairs, that's what we count over. Crucially, the sums themselves are not equally likely, so we must go back to the pairs. The sums range from 2 to 12, and the prime ones among those are 2, 3, 5, 7 and 11. So we need the pairs that produce each of these. Count the pairs behind the smaller primes, some 2 comes one way, some 3 comes 2 ways, some 5 comes 4 ways, that's 7 so far. Now the bigger primes, some 7 has 6 ways, the peak, and some 11 has 2 ways. Adding to the earlier 7 gives 15 favorable pairs. Favorable over total, 15 out of 36, and dividing both by 3 gives 5 over 12. Insight: the whole difficulty was resisting the urge to count sums. You must count the ordered pairs behind each favorable sum, because a 7 is 6 times as likely as a 2. Equal likelihood lives in the pairs, not the totals. Neither ace nor king. Take out both unwanted groups, then count what survives. A well-shuffled deck makes all 52 equally likely, so that's the total. And we know its structure: 4 aces, 1 per suit, and 4 kings, 1 per suit. Neither ace nor king means we throw out both groups, so first count what's being excluded. 4 aces plus 4 kings is 8 cards. Note these don't overlap. A card can't be both an ace and a king. The favorable cards are everything that remains, so subtract those 8 from the 52. That leaves 44 good cards. Favorable over total, 44 out of 52, and dividing both by 4 gives 11 over 13. Insight: for neither A nor B, the safe method is to remove both counts from the total before dividing, and it only works cleanly because aces and kings don't overlap, so 4 plus 4 really is 8 distinct cards to drop. Before the exam, let's lock in everything from this chapter, but not as bare facts to memorize. For each formula we'll recall where it comes from, so it stays with you under pressure. The key formulas with their origins, the smart shortcuts and why they work, the traps to dodge and why they trap, and a memory hook ought to make it stick. Here is the whole chapter on one card, and let's recall why each line is true, not just what it says. Probability is favorable outcomes over all possible outcomes, but only when every outcome is equally likely, because that's what makes dividing fair. Every probability sits between 0 and 1, since favorable can't be fewer than none or more than all. A sure event hits 1, an impossible event hits 0. The complement rule, not E, is 1 minus the chance of E, comes straight from the fact that an event and its opposite cover everything and so add to 1. And keep the sample space sizes ready, because a wrong total sinks the whole answer. 1 die is 6, 2 dies 36 because it's 6 times 6 ordered pairs, a card is 52, 1 coin is 2, and 2 coins are 4. The safest first move is always the same, and it prevents nearly every miscount. List or grid the whole sample space and count it before you do anything else. For 2 dice, draw the 6 by 6 grid, 36 ordered pairs, and you'll never again wonder whether it's 36 or 21. Once the total is nailed down on paper, all that's left is to count the favorable outcomes on the same picture and divide. The grid does the hard thinking for you. Here's a real-time saver, and here's why it works. At least 1 covers a whole spread of cases, 1, 2, 3, and so on, which is tedious to count. But its exact opposite, none, is usually a single clean case. Since the 2 must add to 1, the moment you read at least 1, flip it, compute 1 minus the probability of none. At least 1 head is just 1 minus the chance of no heads at all, 1 easy case instead of a messy pile. One assumption quietly underpins the whole favorable over total formula: the outcomes must be equally likely. If they're not, dividing by the count is meaningless. That condition holds for a fair die or a fair coin, but it fails for the sum of two dice. A 7 can be made 6 different ways while a 12 can be made only one, so a 7 is far more likely. That's why we always drop down and count the equally likely ordered pairs, never the sums themselves. Whenever a problem groups outcomes, pause and ask, are these groups really equally likely? A classic red flag: your probability comes out bigger than 1, or negative. Remember why that's impossible. Favorable outcomes can't outnumber the total, nor drop below 0, so the fraction is locked between 0 and 1. So if you ever write down a 7/6, don't accept it. Stop and treat it as an alarm bell telling you you've miscounted the favorable outcomes or the total. The range rule isn't just a fact, it's a built-in error checker. Another common trap: treating two dice as unordered and getting 21. Here's why that's wrong. If we imagine the dice in different colors, a blue 2 with a gray 5 is plainly a different roll from a blue 5 with a gray 2, two distinct outcomes, not one. Counting them as the same is what shrinks 36 down to a false 21. There are genuinely 36 ordered pairs, 6 times 6, and only those are equally likely. Always work with the full 36. Here's a memory hook. Naughty is 1 minus C. Say it out loud once and the complement rule is yours forever. And it isn't arbitrary. An event and its opposite together cover every possible outcome, so their probabilities must add up to 1, which rearranges to exactly this. Naughty equals 1 minus C. And one more, at least 1 is 1 minus none. This is really the complement rule wearing a disguise. None is the opposite of at least 1. Whenever at least 1 appears, flip it to 1 minus the probability of none, and because none is usually a single easy case, the hard counting simply disappears. In 60 seconds, and remember the reason behind each. Probability is favorable over total, but only for equally likely outcomes, so check that first. It's always trapped between 0 and 1, because favorable can't beat the total or go below none. Sure is 1, impossible is 0. Naughty is 1 minus the chance of A, since an event and its opposite fill the whole. Keep the sizes handy so your total is never wrong. 1 dice 6, 2 dice 36, a card 52, a coin 2. And turn every, at least 1, into 1 minus none. Understand those, not just memorize them, and you're truly exam ready.